Hi all, good evening. Okay, we'll start in a minute. I see more people joining in. So, yeah, just one more minute and we'll begin the session. Okay, I think it's good to begin. Let's start the session. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining in. You are connected to 360 Digital MG value added sessions, and as part of the session, we started to understand what exactly is data engineering means and where does it fit in the entire data science life cycle. So yesterday we tried to understand the high level definition of data engineering by looking at what exactly a data science life cycle looks like. And data engineers basically are the people who are responsible for getting the data from various sources into the system so that the different stakeholders, operational users, analytics purpose, report generation purpose, or the data scientists for doing predictive or statistical analysis, for all these different stakeholders, data is the key. So data engineers are making sure that the data is available, made available for these people at all the life cycle stages. In short, data engineers are expected to do ETL job for data scientists. And we discussed about the CRISP DM methodology, which just enhanced itself to CRISP ML methodology, wherein we also have monitoring and maintenance step added into CRISP ML methodology. And as part of this life cycle, the primary stage or the most important stage, I would say, of course, all of them are equally important. There is no priority or order given to these stages or preference given to these stages. But from a data perspective, the second stage, which is data pre-processing or data preparation, is where data engineering role fits in. And this is the reason why we say data scientist and a data engineer roles and responsibilities are overlapping. Data engineers are responsible for getting the data, but is the data coming in a right form? Is it in structured data form? Can we access the data directly, or should some additional cleaning is required? Is the data integrated, validated? So these are the kind of questions which data scientists used to ask. But now data engineers' roles have slowly taken over these kind of questions for data scientists, so that data scientists can focus their work on model development and training. Basically training and evaluation, right? The fourth step. So third and fourth steps where data scientists focus a lot. Data engineers focus at the initial stage. And we have also discussed about the kind of demand that has been seen for data engineers now, right? It was forecasted, it was foreseen that the specific job for data preparation, data cleaning, data organizing would come in. Probably 4 or 5 years back, it was forecasted, and now we are seeing that job role. We call it as data engineers. And salaries, right? Without data, data scientists can also probably don't work. Right? There is nothing to work for data scientists, right? If data is not provided. So data engineers play a very, very crucial role in these entire data systems. Hence, the salaries are also demanding. So in short, data engineers are responsible to develop this pipeline. And a pipeline is nothing but movement of the data from point A to point B. Now, when we talk about movement of the data can come from various sources in various forms, right? So we have to basically in different systems, different tools. So we should be able to merge all these or integrate all these different sources, data points, right? And pre-process it and produce that for later stages. And at the later stage, when we talk about later stage, this later stage can be there in any stage of your pipeline architecture, data flow. So data scientists or data analysts might come in and take the data and generate reports for operational use. Data scientists might take the same data, do a lot of analysis, and produce some predictive analytics or produce predictive solutions for the business. So data can be collected at different stages, right? So at each stage, the data should be available. And when we speak about the pipeline architectures, we need to see how the data is flowing in these pipelines, in these architectures. So here we are looking at batch data pipeline, right? That is the first thing that we are looking at, batch data pipeline. A batch data pipeline says bulk load of the data, right? You're loading entire data at one go. This is also known as offline data stream or offline data pipeline. Then we also have streaming data pipelines where the data is continuously flowing. As and how the data gets generated, the data gets flowed into or passed into the pipelines. Then we also have change data capture pipelines. Change data capture basically speaks about refreshing data. So anything which is refreshed or altered has to be pushed into the later stages. So this is CDC pipelines, change data capture pipelines. Next, a typical data engineering pipeline, right? We discussed about this as well. You'll have multiple sources. These sources could be of any form, right? This could be of any form. And we are talking about collecting the data from all these forms, different sources, in its raw format and then manipulating it, right? So that the data is transformed into such a way that where we will be able to consume that for performing various results. And the data is probably going into data lakes or data warehouses. Now today we will understand what is the difference between lake and warehouse. Next, this is also something that we discussed. A typical data pipeline would start from data ingestion, right? For a ML application, if I speak about, we have data ingestion, then data preparation. Post that, we define the model to be used, we identify that. Then we start training the model and evaluate the model. When we evaluate the model, we'll also come to know what is parameter which can be altered, what parameter can be altered, which will enable the model to become much accurate, right? So tuning happens here. Hence the arrow is shown like this. Coming back to the training, we tune, come back to the training, we evaluate, we tune, again come back. So it is an iterative process. Finally, once we are done with the tuning, once we are satisfied with the results, then we take it to the model deployment stage, right? And this is a typical ML pipeline. And we have data, big data pipelines where we have predefined architectures. I'll speak about this architecture now. And before I go to the architectures, we also have to see the data pipelines that we are using, right? The tools that we use for developing these pipelines, they should have certain features. Easy to implement, data has to be replicated, data has to be flowed. So configuration should be easy. Maintenance should be easy. The data sources that we have, different data sources we spoke about. So those different sources should also be supported here. It should be able to, the tool should be able to connect to all these sources. Data reliability, that means data should not be lost. And the real-time streaming should also be a feature which is supported by the tool. Suddenly we may have a requirement where it says, I need new data to be pushed into the pipeline. So in such case, if you're using a batch pipeline, batch mode pipeline, and you're using a tool which supports only batch mode pipeline, then it is not going to solve the purpose. So we should also be planning for this kind of change request, right? Scalability. So the tool should satisfy these some of the features. Then we spoke about data sources. This is where your data resides, and you can say generates and stored. And database softwares, this is the primary source. Then we have flat files like your text files, CSV files, Excel files. Cloud platforms are now very prominently used. Then we have web services, you can say social media also here. And then we also have live feeding from the websites, website traffic, you can say. So these are some of the sources where data comes in. And we discussed about all these different tools which will be used for developing a pipeline that doesn't mean that we only stick to this. There are various other things that we can look into. World is a very big place, and we have a lot of tools that can be used for generating a pipeline. Now let us talk about pipelines implemented in your data science lifecycle. When I say data science, I'm talking about ML. Right? When we talk about data science solution, predictive analytics solution, we are speaking primarily about ML pipelines, machine learning implementations. So when we speak about ML pipeline, just now we have seen that it starts with data ingestion. Right? This is the first stage. Then what we do? We clean the data, we prepare the data. This is time-consuming task. Data preparation will be a time-consuming task. Right? And it is very, very dynamic approach. You never know what step you have to use here, right? What kind of strategy you have to use for cleaning and preparing your data. So it becomes very dynamic or subjective. It purely depends on your data. Right? Now, once these two stages are done, then I'm writing it here. The third stage, along with data preparation, data collection, we can also say feature engineering. We are trying to analyze the features that we have collected and cleaned. Now, these feature engineering steps, we have manual steps. We also have algorithms which can be used for automatic algorithms which do feature engineering for us. Right? So this is the next stage. Then comes model generation. This is where we do model generation or training, you can say. Let me write it as training. Which model would you choose? Right? Choice of the model is also important. And when you say training, it is an iterative process. You're basically passing the data so that the algorithm is running through it and trying to identify the coefficients. So there are n number of different models that we can try and experiment. Right? Multiple models. Fifth step would be evaluating. Let me write it like this. Evaluating and fine-tuning. So you need to evaluate the model on some new data, right? Test data. And then we fine-tune it, isn't it? Fine-tuning is nothing but altering the parameters. We call them as hyperparameters. Hyperparameters are to be altered so that the performance becomes much better. Right? Now let me ask you, what are the hyperparameters? Name some. Okay, in the chat window you can name some. What are the hyperparameters for decision tree model? Yeah, let's see. Okay. Very good. Number of leaves, very good. Pruning, very good. K values, we're talking about decision tree. Number of leaf nodes. Yeah, isn't it? That is one. Raghu has mentioned that as one parameter. Number of nodes for minimum number of nodes for looking at splitting the tree, depth of the tree, right? How many branches you want to create, right? Decision stamp, exactly. So there are different hyperparameters that we can alter. We can tune by altering these parameters, right? And finally, the sixth step is evaluating. Model deployment. The sixth step would be model deployment. Now, if you look at these 6 stages, can I automate this? Maybe you can establish a connection with your consistent data, and you can write or design a pipeline which pushes the data into the model. Data preparation, if data changes, the approach should change. So here it would be manual. It can be partially automated. This can also be partially automated. But these two are stages where full automation cannot be made. Then feature engineering. Here I can automate things. Correlation matrix can be done, right? PCA kind of models can be run for doing feature extraction or feature selection. Construct new features based on existing features. So these things are some of the steps where we can automate. Then model training. A number of different models I will take and I will pass the data. I don't have to manually do it. This can also be automated. Sequentially, you call the models and then train. Each model that you are training can be evaluated and tuned, hyperparameter tuning. We have also tried to look into grid search, right? So this can also be automated. So the most time-consuming steps in ML implementation, which are feature engineering, model training, and model evaluation and tuning, are automated. If I can do that, then the process is known as auto ML or auto AI. It may not be fully automated, but at least the ML part of things are automated. So I'm putting this as outside of the box. Then we have feature selection and engineering, model building and training, hyperparameter optimization and coming back. It's an iterative cycle. Once you decide the best one, then we go for deployment. So this part can be automated, right? So data preparation speaks about collecting and cleaning, which cannot be fully automated. But these things can be automated. So there are a lot of packages which are being developed on cloud, on premise, like AutoScaler, AutoKeras, Teapot. These are some of the very, very popularly used applications which can be used on premise also. You don't need to have cloud, right? Process of automating the pipeline. The idea of automating things is to make sure that the analytics that we are trying to define, right? We are basically trying to extract some insights by performing analysis on the data. So the analytics that we are doing can be made available for every user. Even if the person is not a AI or not a data scientist person, a functional person, a business person who has data, should be able to leverage on the features on these platforms, right? So analytics can be taken advantage of. That is the idea. We are democratizing the ML and DL approach. So this is very simply put. I ask a question and I should get answer, irrespective of who I am, right? And this entire process can be automated so that when new data is asked, we can get appropriate answers, right? So this is your auto ML. So just to further define it, automatic data preparation, it may not be completely done, but you can do some part of data cleaning and synthesis. Feature engineering looks into selection, construction, and extraction. Model generation will include choosing the model, different types of models, then hyperparameter tuning of those models, right? In fact, when we talk about neural network, designing the topology of the neural network is also a big task. There's no prefixed topology for neural networks that can be used for any given data, right? You may try out some topology, I may try out different topology altogether, right? Neural networks. So identifying the architecture for neural network, neurons, is also a model generation stage. We call it as NAS, Neural Architecture Search. This can be done using various algorithms, genetic programming and evolutionary algorithms. These are some of the advanced concepts which are done or which are developed based on how biological, right, things are working. Right, and yeah, hyperparameter specifically, if we speak about optimizing the code, optimizing the model specifically, right? So these are some of the things that can be automated. A lot of focus is now being shifted to this space, friends. Auto ML, auto AI space, it's written here, right? This space. So you might also want to enhance your skills in this area. This is one simple example. We know Keras package, right? Keras is used to develop neural networks. Underneath Keras, it uses TensorFlow, right? So can I automate the entire flow using AutoKeras package? Well, yes, we can, right? And it's very simple. In Python, you just install AutoKeras just like any other package. Pass your data. There will be a bunch of arguments that you will have to pass it. That's it. An entire feature engineering to choosing the best model is done by this package, right? Simple one-line package. So this is about your auto ML, friends. Next, we have to look at the architectural diagrams, right? The architecture, for that matter, if I have to put it. When you're talking about any product development in the space of ML or AI, ML, DL or AI, then you will have to first visualize how the data is flowing. So we need to design a data flow diagrams. We also call it as architectural diagrams. Different types of detailing will be there in these diagrams, and based on that we define, we give different names to that. But the primary focus is how the data is flowing from one point to another point. So this is your data architecture. If you can design the data architecture upfront, then it helps the data engineers to design the data pipeline in an appropriate way. right? You'll also know whether it would be batch or streaming process system that you have to develop. There are certain set of rules and regulations that you will have to follow at different touch points, right? Data systems, within the data systems, you'll have different touch points. So if you have the data architecture ready, then you will also be able to understand those standards and then eventually follow the process, right? So the communication between these different data systems can also be designed properly if you have these standards known upfront. So these data architecture or data flow will explain how data is getting processed, stored, and utilized. Of course, where is it getting collected from? Ingestion is also a point that architecture diagram will show, right? And if I know this architecture, then I will be able to control, right, the flow of the data also. We will be able to control it. As a data engineers, you will be able to control the flow. And you cannot say, I will define the architecture after the model is developed. No. Remember, it has to come at data preparation stage only, before you even start data preparation or data cleaning, right? Along with your business understanding and data understanding, the architecture diagram should be ready at the planning phase. Because you will be also deciding on various requirements, resources, whether it is hardware, software, or your human resources, technical capabilities, right? All that will be decided at planning phase only. And if you are clean with your data, clear with your data flow diagram, data architecture, then deciding these things will become easier, right? Management can become much simpler. So that is the reason why data architectural designs are important. Now, when we speak about data architectural design, right, there are different layers to it. We have already discussed it. We already know. Data ingestion layer, the first layer, data ingestion layer. This is to make sure that the data is ingested from different sources, right? We have to collect the data, right? So that is your data ingestion layer. If you set it up, then you will be able to do the collection. Then comes the data collector area, data collection layer. Establish connections at the ingestion layer so that the data can flow. Then you actually import the data in data collector layer. Then we have processing layer. This is basically to do some kind of cleaning on the raw data, right? So here you will be able to do cleaning, pre-processing, descriptive analytics and all that on your data which is coming in. Then comes the storage layer. Now these two steps can be interlinked, okay? These can be interchanged. So once the data is collected, we will have to process and store it, or store and process it. Now once the data is stored, then we will have analytics layer. We also call it as query layer, which gives us results. And we will also be able to have visualization layer, which can represent the entire insights in much easier and simpler way so that the end users can consume that information. This is your visualization layer. Post which we have security, very important, and we also have monitoring stage, which is very important. So these two things come into picture for the entire rest of the architecture. Security should be there at each layer. And we need to constantly monitor so that data is not leaked. The system should be reliable, right? So these are the data architecture layers, simple definitions only. And if I have to talk about data architectures, then I would have to talk about Lambda architecture, which is very, very popularly used. In fact, we know the architecture, but we just don't know that it is called as Lambda architecture. Lambda architecture is a data processing layer or architecture design, which basically has the combination of both these layers, I mean both these systems, batch method and streaming processing method. Both these branches come into the picture for Lambda architecture. Right? This is the architecture where we will have 3 layers: batch layer, speed layer, and serving layer. Batch layer is offline layer where you have the data readily available. You might have written some queries and you might have some reports ready on this, but you'll also have online data coming in, right? So here also we have to write some queries online live, and using both this information we will be extracting insights, right? Which basically goes to the serving layer. Serving layer is nothing but your output layer, right? So this basically looks like Lambda shape, right? Hence it's called as Lambda architecture, like this. It has 2 branches or layers. One is called as batch layer, the another is called as speed layer. Lambda architecture. Then we also have another architecture which is a substitute for Lambda. It is not a replacement or it is not an upgrade of Lambda, but it is a different architecture which can be used in different scenarios. And in Kappa architecture, we will only have streaming layer, nothing else. It will only include streaming layer. So every event, every data point that we are looking at is assumed that it is streamed in. So you can see there is no batch layer, only speed layer will be there. And on this data, we are going to perform queries and get the details. So this is about your Kappa architecture. Now, when we speak about big data pipelines or big data architectures or data flow diagrams, then we have to look at how big data pipelines look like. Again, same process, we have already seen this. It starts with data ingestion layer, then we go for data storage, then we come into pre-processing, then we come into data analysis, and finally reporting. This is a typical pipeline flow or data flow in a batch system, batch mode. But the same thing can be applied in live streaming mode. So streaming mode, the flow will remain same, the stages will remain same, except for the tools that we are using will change. Data ingestion, you can see this, the tools are changing here. Flume, Kafka, Connect, or NiFi is used. NiFi is, you can say NiFi. In storage, yes, we can have HBase or Kafka Core or Kudu. Then data pre-processing, we can use Spark. We can also use K-streams. And for data analysis, we can again use Spark or KSQL or Hive or Impine. Then for visualizations, you have BI tools only. This does not change. There could be, as I mentioned, a small change here, wherein this can come here and this can go here. Right? This small change would also help us to store only relevant data so that at analysis stage it becomes easy, right? So it depends on what we are trying to achieve. Based on that, you can move these stages vice versa here, right? Because I don't want to dump everything here. Probably I want to only take certain things, right, which are relevant for my processing stage. So I would first do pre-processing and then store. So this is another type of architecture that we will see. Now, why we need these different pipelines? Remember I talked about, let me use this. Yeah. We talked about sources. Then we are talking about ingestion, integration, then transformation or processing, right? And then we are talking about storage. Load. And here you will have end users, sources, different sources which are generating. So this is the flow, right? Now, in this pipeline, we are basically looking at ETL role. Extract, transform, and load. Right? So that when you are using this storage location, right, at the end when you are trying to use this area, you would be able to directly generate reports. You will have certain predefined data with schema, and then you will be able to write those default queries or reports that are required. Now, I would draw the same diagram with small change. So here I am saying ingestion, right, or integration. Then I will say storage. Then I will say, here you will say transformations. To get the desired result, you will be performing your pre-processing here. So you can do report generation, but at the same time, you can also do analytics, different types of experiments in this stage. Whereas here your data is predefined, you'll not be able to do much analytics there. Predefined analytics can be done, customization cannot be done. Right? These are the two architectures. Now it depends on the organization and their strategies, right? Which will define whether we use this flow or this flow. But based on these flows, the storage areas that we are speaking about, here we will have to use a different system altogether. So in this place, we will be using data warehouses. We are doing data warehousing here. Whereas here, we are doing data lake task. We are creating a data lake. Now, what is the difference between data warehouse and data lake? When we talk about data warehouse, right, you can see that data warehouse has structured data. But data lake is a dumping area where you just dump any type of data, structured data, semi-structured data, or unstructured data. You can dump anything. If I talk about the size of the storage capacity of data warehouse systems and data lakes, then data warehouses can handle regular data, but of course they can also handle big data. But remember, it has only volume perspective we look at here, and that too, it is not that big. But data lake, it is a pure definition to handle big data systems. And it can be dealing with hundreds of petabytes of data also. Here, probably you deal with terabytes of data. That's another difference. Data lake is like a dumping yard. You just dump everything. So schema is not there, right? Schema is not important. And schema will be decided when you want to read the data from a data lake. For processing purpose, if you are trying to read, then you will probably dynamically define the schema. But for data warehouses, the schemas are predefined. Whatever data that you are storing, it will have predefined schemas. Data warehouses are generally commercialized products, and you will need to have, right, big pockets to use that. It is expensive product. Whereas data lakes are cost effective. Storage cost is very less. You don't have any additional system on top of this file system, right? It's like you're just dumping location. So cost is going to be minimal here. Data warehouses are generally used by operational users. When I say operational users, people who are, right, using it to define certain, let's say, well-defined reports, right? The data can be easily understood and all that. Whereas data lakes is a dumping yard. You have raw data and you will be able to do a lot of analytics on that. Experimentation can be done. So data scientists will come into the picture. So if you look at this data warehouse and data lake, traditional extract, transform, and then load into the system so that it is having predefined structure. Whereas if you look at the data lake scenario, you're extracting the data and loading it first before transforming. ETL versus ELT. That is the difference between data warehouse and data lakes. So the users will be able to generate predefined reports, and probably are going to analyze on certain metrics which are predefined already, right? Whereas you can perform a lot of deep analysis on this data and customizations can be done. These are some of the examples. I'm only focusing on cloud related examples here. I'm not talking about the products which are offline. We can also talk about various other things. Snowflake is one example we can speak about if I have to talk about the on-premise thing. So Amazon Redshift, this is from AWS. BigQuery, that is from Google Cloud. Synapse Analytics is from Azure, right? And then we have DB2 Warehouse from IBM. These are popular cloud platforms, right? So we're talking about the top 3, in fact, IBM also 4. Whereas data lake is a storage area, it does not have any structure and all that, right? So it's just like a dumping yard, as I mentioned. To begin with, the entire dumping yard data lake can be created in just a Hadoop HDFS framework file system, HDFS file system. The same concept is enhanced on the cloud, and we are talking about Amazon S3 buckets. S3 is storage service from Amazon, where you will just create folders and dump your data, right? So that is one of the tool or one of the location where you can create data lakes. Azure Data Lake, it has store and HD insights. We are talking about storage here. Azure Data Lake Store. And then we have Google Cloud Storage, GCS. These are the examples with respect to cloud platforms of data lakes and data warehouses. Now, each of these tools that we speak about, of course, will have some advantages and it has their own disadvantages as well. If I talk about SAP, somebody is asking about SAP. SAP is an ERP phrase, right? It's like a entrepreneur, enterprise, entire enterprise solution. So it has multiple modules in it. And SAP also has a cloud data warehouse version to it. Right? SAP Data Warehouse. We call it as SAP Data Warehouse. And it sits on top of SAP HANA database. Okay. All right. So this is some of the examples. Now, if we talk about these platforms, of course, we'll have a lot of advantages. But remember, there are different types of these options, data lakes, especially if you talk about. You will be able to have on-premise storage devices, right? For example, HDFS, you can create a on-premise Hadoop cluster and then keep dumping your data there. So you can have offline or on-premise data. You can have cloud data lakes. These are all cloud data lakes. We can also have hybrid combination of these two. In fact, now we're also looking at multi-cloud capabilities. Not just on-premise versus online and combination of those, but can I use, for example, Amazon and GCP or GCP and Azure? Oh yes, we can. So that is your multi-cloud capabilities is what we are speaking about with respect to data storage. And remember, data lakes will allow you to basically perform a lot of in-depth analysis, experimentation. So for analytics, data lakes are preferred. For reporting, data warehouses are preferred. From capacity wise, data lakes are there's no limit. And because it is only talking about dumb, storage dumb, nothing, no pre-processing and all that, cost is less. We've already discussed that. Right? And as I said, because it is distributed environment concept, we basically are looking at unlimited storage here. So scaling is not at all a problem. Right? So these are the comparisons between data warehouse and data lakes. And depending on what we are trying to do as an organization, the strategy has to be designed to get these entire pipelines ready. Right? So we have to make sure that the pipeline is ready so that the respective teams come into picture and try to take the advantage of the data. So this is primarily what we are going to talk about as part of data engineers. And of course, as I mentioned, there are various things which will come into picture. We'll also have workflow management tools that have to be also discussed as part of this entire flow. But remember, this flow is to be automated. CDCI. Continuous development should be there. And all these systems should be continuously integrating with each other. So overall, designing, developing, and maintaining of these pipelines is the job of a data engineer. And this is the most in-demand job role in the industry right now, along with data scientists. So take the advantage. If you have capabilities of both the skills, then obviously you will be in demand in the market. Right? So with that, let me conclude. Hope you have learned something new, right? Do connect with us. We keep doing this value added session so that we constantly give new information to our folks. This in a hope that it will help you to upskill in your profile, in your career. So hope you have grasped some information and prepare according to the requirements or according to the needs. Right. All the best for your future, and thank you all, friends. Take care and good night.